So these are the topics of today's video session. So we will be covering about requirement engineering, establishing the groundwork in this video session. Next coming video sessions we will be covering about eliciting requirements and developing use cases. Requirement engineering is actually the broad spectrum of tasks and techniques that leads to an understanding of the requirement. Actually here we will be concentrating on all the mechanisms which is mainly used to understand the requirement clearly. As we have already discussed in the classes, the first phase of project development is requirement analysis. So while understanding the requirements, we should be very much careful enough in such a way that if we make any errors in the requirement engineering process, that is the first phase, obviously the other coming phases will lead to a failure of software development. This particular phase begins with the communication activity and sometimes it continues until the modeling activity. As we have already discussed in the classes, this encompasses of 7 different tasks. So the requirement engineering of a complex software, that is the communication activity of a complex software, will have 7 different tasks in it. Namely, inception, elicitation, elaboration, negotiation, specification, validation and management. Now we'll get into each and every phase in detail. First one is called as inception. So the main focus of this inception phase is to establish a basic understanding of the problem, the client for whom we are developing the software, and also the nature of the software. And here we'll be going to identify the preliminary communication and collaboration mechanism. How to gather the requirements. So that particular base information has to be first identified. And here we are going to identify our communication mechanism between the stakeholders and the software team. So who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are those who are directly and indirectly are going to get benefited by means of the software. We'll see examples for the stakeholders later. The second phase is called as elicitation. So here we are going to ask the customer about the following questions. For example, what are their main objective for the development of the software, their own business goals and the software usage in a daily basis. The main task of this elicitation process is to establish the business goals and the design rationale. So based on these goals and rationale means some quality constraints. So based on these two, we are going to develop the software. The third phase is called as elaboration. So as the name says here, the information which is obtained in the previous 2 phases, that is inception and elicitation, will be expanded and we are going to refine it in a clear way. So this identifies various aspects of software function, its complete behavior and also the major information which are necessary for developing of the software. We are going to introduce a special term which is called as user scenarios. Remember students, user scenarios are also called as use cases. So we will be discussing in detail in the next coming video session about what is use cases. So the main objective of this user scenario is to depict the functionality of a software in a systematic way. So here we will be giving some stories to the user. User will react, that is a customer, will be seeing how the customer reacts for the complete story, that is a particular situation. So how they interact with others, based on which we will be going to get some additional input for the development of the software. The next phase is called as negotiation phase. So here we are going to resolve the conflict which is present in the requirement. Students, as I have said you, there will be many people involved in the software during the requirement elicitation phase. So in such a case, each and every people will say their own requirements in their own fashion. So obviously we could have some conflict in the requirements which we have obtained now. So it is very important to resolve those conflicts. Conflicts means some misunderstandings or miscommunications. So customers, users and other stakeholders are asked to rank the requirements. So after getting the requirements, in previous phases we will be listing all the requirements one after another and we will be submitting to the users. Now the user will, that is the customers, will now rank these requirements like which has a priority 1, 2, 3 and then 4, like which it goes on. Now what we do is that based on such priority and also considering the cost and the risk which is going to be evolved in the software development, some requirements can be eliminated. For example, the 4th choice will be eliminated, or I can combine 2 different requirements something, or I can modify some requirements. So these things will be done during the negotiation phase. And the next phase is called as specification. So this is where we will be documenting our requirement. So it is either in a written document, or we can introduce some graphical models, that is diagrams can be introduced. We can introduce some mathematical concepts over here, models can be introduced, or it can be a collection of user scenarios, which I said you as use cases. Even we can have prototype. So I've also already said you prototype is a model like, which is present in some hotels or some shopping mall, or it can be a combination of all these parameters. Here we are in need to go for a standard template in order to document these user requirements. So remember students, in our lab we have discussed that we are using IEEE format to document this requirement, that is SRS. Software requirement specification will be documented based on IEEE format, like which we have to use some standard templates in order to document the user requirements. The next task is called as validation. After getting all the requirements, after filtering it, negotiating it, and after documenting it, we are in need to check whether it is satisfying with a good quality. So its quality has to be assessed. So here we are in need to check whether all the requirements are stated unambiguously. That is, there is no ambiguity, repetition, or some confusion arises over here. There is no inconsistencies, and there is no omissions, there is no errors, etc. And we are in need to confirm whether everything is up to the standard. So to do this, we will be going for a technical review. So we will be calling a team of stakeholders and will be asking to review, that is, check whether all the parameters which is present here are addressed in the software requirement specification. And the next phase is called as requirement management. This is the last phase. So after identifying requirement validation, after the software development, that is modeling, has been started, even in such a case, we can have a situation that is the requirement may change. So the change management has to be obviously addressed. So this is used to help the project team to identify, control, and track the requirement and changes which is present in the requirement. The next topic is establishing the groundwork. So before finalizing the requirement, we are in need to check certain groundwork parameters. So under that, the first one is called as identifying the stakeholders. So stakeholders are nothing but anyone who directly or indirectly gets benefited from the software. So for example, business operation managers, product managers, marketing people, internal external customers, end users, consultants, product engineers, etc. So all these people are called as stakeholders. The next concept is recognizing multiple viewpoints. So as we have said here, there are multiple stakeholders involved for a software. So obviously the requirements will be obtained from different point of view or different angles. For example, marketing group will be focusing on easy to sell perspective. Business managers will focus on budget which is involved in the software. While the end users, that is people who actually use the software, will focus on the features of easy to use. Software engineers will focus on core functionalities. So we are having multiple viewpoints. We are in need to address all the viewpoints together. Next is called as working towards collaboration. So all these stakeholders should collaborate among themselves. That is, for example, the marketing group should compromise something for the business managers. So if the business managers are targeting towards budget, marketing group understand the issues in the budget and they have to reduce their requirements. Similarly, software engineers should also reduce their requirements based on either budget or marketing parameters, etc. So requirements engineer identifies the areas of commonality and conflicts. So the people who are all involved while giving the requirements which leads to such conflicts are to sit together. They are in need to collaborate and discuss to resolve that inconsistencies. Asking the first questions. So here 3 categories of questions will be asked to the end users, that is stakeholders. The first set of questions will be context free question. So it doesn't depend upon any particular software, it is totally context free. So this is used to identify the overall project goals and benefits towards the system. The next set of questions is used to get a better understanding of the problem. So such questions will also be asked. Similarly, this is followed with the final set of questions which is focusing on the effectiveness and communication activity. Next, we are focusing on non-functional requirements. So in class, I've already said you, non-functional requirements is a quality-based requirement, or it may be a performance, or it may be a security, or it may be a general constraint to a system. Non-functional requirements are not directly involved to the system, but they are indirectly involved. These are the additional requirements that are must for a quality software. For example, the software should be produce a good response time. It should have a good performance criteria, and also it should be secured enough. So these are the examples of non-functional requirements. The last concept is called as traceability. So this is used to refer document links between the software engineering work products. That is, this is a matrix-like representation which is going to allow the requirement engineer to represent the relationship between requirement and the final document. That is, the requirements will be written in each and every row, followed by the corresponding product which is satisfying the requirement. For example, if the first particular requirement is satisfied through the second product, a tick mark or a cross mark will be mentioned over here. Similarly, the second requirement is satisfied with both first product and second product, but the third requirement has not been matched with any of the products. By this, we can understand the unaddressed requirement. So for example, in this matrix, I can clearly say that the third particular requirement is not addressed by any one of the software products. So we are in need to complete this particular software development. By this, we come to the end of this video session. Thank you for your patient listening.